you did mention that you've just sold Wrestling Inc. So how did that come about?
Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and stand back for another interview. This time, I'm joined by Raj Giri from Pro Wrestling Inc. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me on.
So if we take this back to the beginning, before your work in the wrestling media, where do you first discover wrestling?
Oh, man. That would be in the...
I became a huge Macho Man Randy Savage fan. And yeah, it kind of fostered from there. But yeah, 1987, it was a Saturday night main event. We were at my friend's house. I kind of knew all the wrestlers from like Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling and shows like that. But I was over at their house. Saturday night's main event was on. I got hooked. It ended with King Kong, Andre the Giant choking Hulk Hogan. All these guys trying to save Hogan, and that was leading to a match on TV, and I was just sucked in.
Do you think if you discovered today's wrestling at that time, you'd be as sucked in? And if you discovered that sort of wrestling at the age you are now with no prior wrestling knowledge, you would have been as sucked in?
It all depends on the time. Yeah, because the 80s, everything was so over the top. A lot of those characters would work back then. I don't know if the Ultimate Warrior would work today, but I thought it was an awesome character back then. As for now, I don't know, just because there was so much wrestling on, and it's such a commitment to get into it. And my daughters, they'll watch some wrestling here and there, and they actually enjoy it when they watch it. But they're not going to be sitting there watching for 3 hours every Monday night.
Fair enough. So moving on in your wrestling journey, have you had, because you started in the 80s, how much were you consuming in the 90s?
A lot. When I went to college, I wasn't watching as much because in our dorm room, we didn't have cable. But I had at my parents' house, I had on the VCR, they would still record Raw. And so I'd go home and try to catch up on Raw whenever I could. But after my first couple of years in college, once I got an apartment, I was watching it all the time. I was watching everything, watching WCW, WWF. I wasn't as fully back into it until like 1996, 1997, but I still followed it.
Have you had like a gap period? Is there like a gap in your knowledge where you stopped maybe watching?
93 when I went to college that first year, just because we didn't have cable, but I didn't stop watching completely. I still kind of followed it, but I wasn't watching it weekly. So that would have probably been the only time. There was a summer there, we went to India, and I wasn't able to watch it that summer, but that wasn't because I wasn't a fan, but it was because we were there. And there was a time when I started my MMA site, and I wasn't really happy with some of the stuff WWF at the time was doing. And so I was still following it, but not watching it religiously.
Fair enough. So, but what is an era maybe that you have watched that you've maybe gone looking back now that you're like, if I wasn't in the media or wasn't as invested for other reasons, you might have stopped watching?
Mid 90s. And that's before I was in the media. Since then, gosh, I think there's been a lot of different periods where it doesn't feel like much is going on, and I could easily have seen myself drifting off, like early 2010s. After CM Punk left, felt like the product kind of went down a little bit, slowed down a bit. But so yeah, probably in the last decade, I feel like there were definitely moments when Raw moved to 3 hours, and it just it could be hard to watch at 3 hours every Monday night at times.
Fair enough. So if we move on to your career in the wrestling media, what was like your first foray into wrestling media?
Well, I started the site. I started getting into wrestling media in '96, mainly because I was in engineering school and I hated engineering, and I had to find something else to do. And I was like, okay, well, the internet's starting to pick up. Maybe I'll learn how to make a website. And I was a wrestling fan at the time. I needed a topic, something to make a website on. And so I chose wrestling. And at first, it was just my opinions on the storylines that were happening. I had a GeoCity site. They gave out free sites. And then I started getting traffic, and it got me psyched. And I started working on it more and more, and started building contacts, starting to do interviews. And by '97, I started Wrestling Inc., and it was a full-on website.
How ultimately did you come up with a name for Wrestling Inc.? Like, that might sound like a very stupid question, but how did you come up with a name?
Well, at the time, I had envisioned like a bunch of different wrestling stuff on Wrestling Inc. So I wanted something that it wasn't just going to be wrestling news. It was also going to be a place where you could trade trade tapes. You could comment. There were chat boards and stuff like that. And so I wanted something that kind of was like a broader wrestling name, and not just, wrestling news or wrestling videos or whatever. So yeah, that's where I was like just kind of coming up with names, and Wrestling Galaxy, Wrestling Inc., Wrestling World, and then I settled on Wrestling Inc.
Fair enough. Why did you ultimately settle on that name then?
I was shorter, easy to say, and I just liked it.
Fair enough. How have you seen, if you started it in '97, how have you seen Wrestling Inc. change in the last however many years it has been going?
Yeah, so in May was our 25th anniversary, which was a big milestone. And I'd actually, on Twitter, I'd posted some screenshots of Wrestling Inc. over the years and what it looked like and the design changes. But I feel like our writing's gotten better. I feel like our staff's gotten better. I feel like we're more consistent, over the years. I feel like we get a lot bigger interviews now. Now we work with WWE and AEW and all the other promotions, and try to go to the major events. We interview their talent, and that's changed a lot, because WWE for the longest time would not allow wrestling media to interview their stars, and they're still not as willing, but they do it now way more than they used to.
What is some changes you maybe want to see Wrestling Inc. make in the next 25 years?
I'd like to see more video. I'd like to see, I think with TikTok and all these things, that it's just moving to short attention spans and short video clips. I'd like to see incorporating some of that more, and just always keeping up with the time.
Fair enough. What do you feel like is the biggest story Wrestling Inc. has broken?
Gosh, there have been a lot over the years. I mean, just recently, the Sasha Banks leaving, being released. There was the one where WWE issued an edict that talent could no longer have third-party accounts like TikTok and things like that. And we broke that, and I think that was definitely one of the bigger ones for sure. That's in recent memory. In the past, there have been quite a few that I'm just kind of forgetting right now.
Do you ever worry, like, I'll use the Sasha one as an example, like, say it turns out that, and I'm not trying to say it was you or anyone, but like, she does go back to WWE. Do you worry about how that's going to affect your credibility?
I mean, look, every reporter at some point is wrong. I've made sure on this particular one. I always double source, and that's why I don't have I don't come out with as many exclusives as some others do, because I always do double source. And I'm not saying others don't, but just with me, sometimes trying to get something double sourced, you don't get it. This case, I was able to. But look, every reporter is wrong at times, and anytime you're wrong, you just issue a correction and move on and try to do better. Try to do better the next time.
For anyone looking to get into the wrestling media, if they do break a story that maybe affects their credibility, damages it, how can they rebuild that credibility?
Just by being accurate the next time and working harder and doing better. I think that's with anything. You're always going to mess up at some point. In any job, any occupation, mistakes happen, and it's doing better, correcting those mistakes, and moving on and showing people that you've gotten better and you've improved.
Fair enough. So with Wrestling Inc. currently, are we allowed to talk about what you told me off camera?
Sure. Yeah.
So you did mention that you've just sold Wrestling Inc. So how did that come about?
I've for decades I've had people wanting to buy the site, and usually, it usually doesn't go very far. But you do hear, because a lot of times it's not very serious offers and things like that. But and plus, I wasn't that eager to sell in the past. And just recently, it's been 25 years. I've been doing this a long time. I do have other interests. I've been investing for a long time, doing real estate, and just looking to spend more time with my kids. Are getting older. I'm seeing that I'm like, oh, this is one less summer we're gonna have, before my oldest goes to college, and I just want to spend more time and be present. So it just seemed like the right time. I've gotten a few offers over the past year, and this company, Static Media, they own a bunch of other large sites like Looper and Flash Film and Grunge and other sites like that. So I knew it would be in good hands. They'd take care of it. And so when we spoke, the whole thing happened, fairly quickly, and I was really impressed with them. And we're still in the process of moving Wrestling into their platform. In a few weeks, you'll see a whole new design, a whole new look, and it's exciting. They have a lot of big plans.
What is something that you have been, when you're talking to them, adamant that you're like, I want this to stay the same?
Well, I wanted a lot of our staff. I wanted them to remain, and I think Static had every intention to. So that was the biggest thing. And yeah, just we're the number one trafficked wrestling site, and with that, there's a lot of responsibility in just maintaining that level of quality and everything.
What is something that you're now like, not thank God I haven't got to do that anymore, but like, what is something that you're relieved is maybe taken off your plate, I'll say, since you've sold it? I hope that made sense, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not doing much on the content side now, which I really like. It's a nice breather. So, I'll still give them advice and things like that as needed, but it just takes a lot of load off my plate, and also not having to deal with advertising and sponsors and the technical end, because the tech is going to be moving to their system. So it's a lot of, all that is a big relief. With
selling Wrestling Inc., is there a desire for you to I'll say it like that, cut ties with the wrestling media altogether?
No, I think I'm always going to be involved. And I still enjoy it. I sometimes enjoy the wrestling news and all that more than the TV product. And I find it a lot more interesting. So, I don't see myself cutting ties on that end.
Are you hoping that now maybe you're not as involved in the day-to-day side of it, that will maybe rekindle your passion for wrestling a bit more?
Yeah, you know what? Also, this summer I've kind of been I haven't been watching much wrestling live. I'm catching it later, and I feel like just taking a little break, it's getting me reinvigorated. So yeah, for sure. And I think there's a lot of cool stuff coming up this fall. And so I think, yeah, definitely.
What keeps you? What wrestling are you currently watching? Like, what do you have to maybe watch for work? And then, what is the show that, say, like you weren't involved in the wrestling media, you'd be like, "This is the show I've got to check out every week."
In general, I feel like last year I'd say SmackDown and Dynamite, and this year really I'd still say Dynamite for AEW. And with WWE, it varies week after week with Raw and SmackDown. I feel like they're not as consistent. And so, for a month when Roman's on SmackDown, I find that to be more interesting.
Yeah.
When it was Cody, I was finding Raw to be more interesting. So it really goes back and forth depending on who's available. But I do fast forward a lot, of the shows right now that I don't have to watch live.
What is a habit that maybe you got into when you were a lot more involved with Wrestling Inc. that maybe now you're like, you've got to retrain your brain to not do as much?
Yeah, I mean, the site was basically 24/7. So if I wake up, if I look over at the clock at 1 a.m, I'd still go to my phone, check it, make sure everything's okay. 3 a.m, still doing the same thing. Then waking up at 5, and it's just 18-hour days most days of the week. And so just kind of slowing down, and if I wake up in the middle of the night knowing that I don't have to check everything and worry about a lot of the same things I used to. So that part, I can sleep better, I guess.
Fair enough. So since you're maybe, I don't want to say not as involved, but like you've handed off the site, what keeps you motivated to stay in the wrestling media?
I just enjoy it. I've been, when you've been doing it for 25 years, there are parts of it that can weigh down on you, but for the most part, I just find it fascinating, and I'm checking out, Wrestling Inc. constantly during the day. I'm still reading The Observer. I'm checking out Sean's stuff at Fightful. So I still enjoy keeping up with what's going on, and I still have a lot of contacts that I plan to keep and stay in touch with. So yeah.
If you stopped enjoying wrestling media altogether, would you have to walk away?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, why do something you don't enjoy? So
fair enough. As we look at wrapping this up, because I do want to be respectful of your time, we're going to go into a segment now that I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my videos before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite superstar or wrestler of all time, favorite tag team, and favorite theme song. Basically questions that I'm sure Raj gets asked on social media quite regularly. So now you have a place to be like, look guys, I've answered this. Please go watch this. So what's your favorite match of all time?
So I'm going to not count current stuff just because I know a lot of people currently, it just, but I'll do stuff more from my childhood when I was a teenager and those years. So favorite match of all time, for a lot of reasons, I'd say it was probably Hulk Hogan versus Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3. That was just the storyline going into it. And as a match, nothing great, as far as work rate and everything goes. But at the time, I thought it was just awesome. So as far as just the characters and the storyline, that to me was everything that got me into wrestling. So I thought that was just a larger than life match. And but as far as like action and in ring, I'd say Shawn Michaels versus The Undertaker at the first one, WrestleMania 24.
25
was the first, and 25 was the first, and 26 was the second.
Yep.
So yeah, the first.
Because you had Flair at 24, and then it was
right.
Oops,
so, yeah,
I just corrected someone. I shouldn't do that. Sorry.
Like WrestleManias 1 through 20, I could tell you like the whole card and everything, and then after 20, it gets kind of blurry.
Yeah. Favorite pay-per-view of all time?
I didn't get to see WrestleMania 3 live. I would say WrestleMania 17, maybe, or even WCW Bash at the Beach 96, where Hogan turned, because that was just immense. It was just such an immense moment, and that's for a match that had no finish. That's like one of the most popular endings ever. So yeah.
Just quickly, as a Hogan fan when you were younger, what is your thoughts on the heel turn?
What's that?
What is your thoughts
Thoughts on
on the heel turn?
The greatest heel turn of all time. Greatest turn of all time. I don't think anything can ever top that. And it changed wrestling. So, I mean, anyone that was a wrestling fan during those years, 96 to 99, that was a magical period.
I saw a stat the other day that really like weirded me out. It was like Hogan's been responsible for 2 wrestling booms. And it's like, yeah, that's true. That is actually true. But
I know he's not as popular in a lot of circles with some of his controversies, but there's no doubting the man changed wrestling.
Definitely. But and then favorite we've done favorite pay-per-view, favorite tag team of all time.
I really like Demolition, but and I like the Rockers. Favorite, I'd say Demolition from when I was a kid. I love that team.
Is it the Doomsday Device by any chance?
The Doomsday Device was the Road Warriors.
Oh, damn it. Damn it. Oops. Yeah. Sorry.
I like the Road Warriors too. I just thought I was as a kid I was more WWF
then
guy.
That I've completely blanked.
What was it called? It was called the it's where they Smash would put the wrestler on his knee and then Axe would come off the second rope with the elbow.
Right, yeah. I'm thinking of on shoulders, off top rope.
Yeah.
That is the Road Warriors, isn't it?
Yeah, that's the Road Warriors.
Sorry.
That was an awesome move too.
Worst interview ever. I completely effed up.
No worries.
And then favorite wrestling theme of all time.
Wrestling female?
Theme song.
Theme. The old SummerSlam thing. Like in 1989, 1990.
Fair enough. And then the final generic question is, who is your favorite wrestler of all time?
Macho Man. Macho Man Randy Savage. He's one of those that at his peak, you'll never go to a restaurant or a bar and be like, that guy reminds me of Macho Man Randy Savage, at least with their mannerisms and everything. He was so unique. I mean, just 1 in 8 billion. So Macho Man for sure. As
just one question as we look at wrapping this up. Do you think Macho Man could have worked in today's era? Say we had a DeLorean or something and he was like, he got transported to today's era. Do you think he could work?
Absolutely. Late 80s Macho Man, especially in the company like AEW, where he has the freedom to work on his character and his promos and is not doing scripted promos. I think he'd do very well today.
Fair enough. And as we look at wrapping this up, I want to obviously say thank you to Raj for coming on. But the question that I end all my videos on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general, and even writing in your case. We're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of weird way. So what is one product of yours that you're like, don't go back and look at that. I've grown a lot since then. And then what is one that you're like, if you want to know my body of work, go check that out?
I guess some of the early podcasts we did, it was so new. So I don't go back and look at those. And as far as body work, Wrestling Inc., I'm so proud of the site and all the work, not just me, but all the people over the years have put into it to get it to where it is. And that is, hopefully my lasting legacy, I guess.
Fair enough. And then as we look at wrapping this up, obviously I want to say thank you for coming on, but where can the good people find you, Raj?
You can find me on Twitter at Raj Giri, and keep checking out WrestlingInc.com as well.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow bodyslam.net on YouTube and Twitter, and the WrestleWatch podcast on Twitter for my show with Cassidy Haynes, the WrestleWatch podcast. And I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.